Hi, this is Rob Sheen from the Source Conference, and I'm here with Richard Thieme from ThemeWorks, and he's going to be discussing strategies for playing through the pain, the impact of dark knowledge on security professionals, and the road to resilience. And Richard actually did an earlier version of this talk, one of the first times he did the talk at Source Boston back in 2016. And he's going to be giving the latest version of the talk at Source Austin on December 5th and 6th, coming up soon. So, Richard, why don't you tell us a little bit about your talk and how it's evolved
Well,
since you started giving it?
the talk keeps evolving. The basis for it was listening closely for 25 years, which is as long as I've been doing this, speaking and writing for 25 years, to colleagues and friends who have grown over that time, into quite an assembly of extraordinary people. And I've listened to their stories, not just about the technical work, which is where I sit like a child at their feet and try to pay attention, but to the impact the work has had on them and different situations they find themselves in, which have had a lasting and sometimes negative traumatic impact, which compels a response. When I first did the talk, the one we did for Source 2 years ago, I wrote to colleagues and said, "Have you got any stories you want to share?" And over 50 people from CIA and NSA and corporate and military venues responded with detailed and often poignant, very emotion-laden narratives of what they had experienced. And so many people continued to respond to that talk. When I did it at DEF CON, somebody asked me if I could hear people crying in the audience. Now, imagine I've spoken at DEF CON this year, this 23rd year, and you don't usually look out at a room of 1,000 people with standing room around the edges and hear people sniffling, crying, and in one case, one guy said, "Did you hear me sobbing in back?" Because it struck such a chord. Because instead of a technical talk aimed at the Mr. Robot persona, which so many hackers and security wonks carry in their heads, this was aimed directly at the heart. So it kind of hacked the psyche to go past that and talk to the human being and how they were influenced. So as this continued, a lot of people asked for, we need strategies for this, and that was my talk this year. Will be the talk for Source this year, much more detailed on what are the things we can do based on what people have learned out of their experience. And once again, about 20 more people responded with narratives to that. So this is quite a large collection of real life, frank, upfront, authentic stories people have shared with me that I integrate into a singular narrative of this is what can happen, this is what we can do about it. And just recently, Rob, Ari Shapiro on NPR did a story on the cleaners who are now charged in the aftermath of all the hullabaloo about social media with cleaning up accounts at Facebook and Google and so on. And some of them, one said he has seen so many beheadings that when he sees one done with a very sharp edge, he thinks it's kind of a blessing instead of some of the worst. They have seen so much awful stuff, but the result, as one said, is I can't go into public spaces anymore because I've watched so much video of terror acts. That like seeing a movie over and over again or watching the news over and over again. It impacts all of us. So the mind of society has been terrorized by the media amplification of events which actually might be quite rare, but which, because if it bleeds, it leads, they drive home.
Hmm.
Starting with 9/11, when I said the media was complicit 100% in terrorism because it could have reported the acts without showing them again and again and again until the entire public was traumatized. And it's hard not to believe that some people behind the scenes really relish that fact because the billions of dollars that have grown into the security industry in that regard since then have shown that fear and terrorizing a population can pay off. So it's not just people who do this work professionally, it's all of us. But because of where security professionals often find themselves, it can hit home particularly hard and particularly easy. And the question is, are you discussing it inside? organizations making available a platform to talk seriously about this, because all that's required in our humanity is that we acknowledge what's real for us and then take the measures or steps that are appropriate to keeping ourselves as whole as we can be. It's not that we get rid of these scars. To be a scarred adult is to be an adult. We carry these wounds through life, and they're marks of our often maturity. But if we don't attend to them and respond, as I say, by traveling the road to resilience, they can have a very, very negative impact on other areas of our lives. And that's part of what I've listened to, the divorces, the alcoholism, the suicides. One colleague at CIA said he carries in his head 23 suicides. And when my friend at NSA wrote that there were 3 suicides that week, and I saw a former deputy director at a conference and asked him about it, he just shook his head and he said, no, there were 6 this week, not 3. And he looked at me, knowing my background as a clergyman, which I did for 16 years, and he said, doing this work, I have lost my faith. Well, it's to that abyss that I'm trying to speak and invite people not to join a tea group at your conference, but to look at seriously and clearly what they do, how it affects them as people, and how that affects their relationships and their health and their lives, and how to respond in a positive, proactive way to it.
Right. Yeah, because what was interesting, I remember from the original talk, was that, you know, just people doing regular security work and being exposed on a regular basis to things they can't talk about.
Right.
Or like in your example, like, you know, people cleaning up things and having to look at, you know, horrible images, but even just doing mundane things, but that you can't talk about and having to go home and keep that to yourself. Like the idea that manifests in some of the similar ways as PTSD was fascinating to me, and something we should really be aware of.
Well, that's right. And it crosses over. I think I say that in the abstract. The distinction between security work and intelligence work is really hard to draw these days, because the line is very, very blurred, in that you are working for a combination, a combine, a complex of military and government and corporate structures, which so intertwine that it's very difficult to tell where one begins and the other ends, and habits and NDAs that require secrecy often compel people to take some of these hard truths and bury them. And the results, as they are in the intelligence community, the IC, are often that you don't know how to have a normal, authentic relationship with another human being. And yeah, I have plenty of stories about that, what it does to your family. One friend mentioned that at NSA, a young man finally got all his clearances, and he came to the agency for his first day of work. And that's when he discovered for the first time that both of his parents worked there. Well, a family is supposed to be a truth-telling kind of trust organization, right? And you find out in your 20s that your mother and your father have been lying to you your entire life long, and proud of it. Proud of it. One guy told me when his daughter got clearances, I think it was naval intelligence, and she said it was hard because she was in a conversation about some geopolitical event, and she was going to weigh in, and she realized she couldn't talk about it. And her mother, who was there, said, well, don't worry, you can talk to Dad about it when you get home. And she said, no, I can't. He's not read into the program, and he's not cleared to know what I know. And he said he was so proud to hear her say that. Well, he's proud that his daughter is keeping secrets. The child, I guess, was nonplussed, but somewhat proud that his parents had lied to him his whole life long. How do you have a genuine relationship based on forthrightness, honesty, integrity, and trust when your whole foundation is to deceive, dissemble, cover, and manipulate other people, which becomes so habitual that even at cocktail parties, someone starts a conversation, you're immediately on guard. You're wary. Sometimes you wonder, are they targeting me? Did they start a conversation in order to elicit information from me so a competitor can know what we're really up to? I mean, every man and woman is a spy these days for their corporation, sometimes wittingly, sometimes not. So we've created this world, uh, hammered, literally. We're the nails, and it's hammered by secrecy and the consequences of secrecy and deception. And didn't used to be like that. Always there have been lies and deception, but we didn't have an entire systemic commitment to not telling each other the truth unless we give away something of value. And as I say, the consequences for us as human beings, they come home unfortunately, in our relationships and our habits. And we often take the wrong way out to try to self-medicate.
Hmm.
And then we just need to tell the truth to someone we can trust. And that's one of the themes that recurred when I listened to people telling me again and again what they did. It started with having one or two or three people they could absolutely trust, often people who had clearances as well, where they could explore all of what they were experiencing. And without that, the isolation made them rigid, intensified their fear, and shut them down even more. So we need colleagues, we need friends, we need allies in truth and truth telling in order to find our way into a community that's really kind of countercultural to so much of what our corporations demand from us.
Right. Yeah, the self-medicating thing is an ongoing theme. Stacey Thayer is actually going to be at the conference and doing a talk on self-care as well. And so we actually had the conversation. I was actually had her on our podcast last night, and we were talking about having a drink to relax is fine as long as that's not the only thing you have to do to relax. So what do you see as some either maybe warning signs that people should be kind of self-aware of, or maybe things they can do to be more resilient so that they can kind of deal with these stresses that come up in work?
Sure, good question. Warning signs are, what are you really hearing that you don't shut out through denial or minimization or rationalizing it? I just read a diary my father wrote when he went to Europe after World War II, and it included in the diary his statement that the other people he traveled with, an important group of people, allocating scrap after the war to various Allied governments, and he said people were confronting him about how much he drank. And he laughed. He said that was funny. He says, they just don't understand how we drink in Chicago. Well, no, that's not true, Dad, I would have said. That's how you drink in Chicago, but there are other people who drink moderately and others who don't drink at all. But he used that to rationalize what, obviously, from the rest of the pages and what I heard in my family, was alcoholism. So it's really hard. Denial is a funny thing. I mean, a lot of jokes about denial is not just a river in Europe and all that. But when you're in denial, you don't know you're in denial. That's why we call it denial. You don't realize that your psyche thinks it's protecting you in order to protect your ways out of pain. And you've chosen those. And so it's not letting it get through to you until you have either so much pain, so much disarray in your life that it overwhelms your denial, and you have what they call in AA a moment of clarity, in which suddenly everything comes into focus and you see clearly what you've done. Now, the truth is that's often a very bad moment, a very painful moment. And that's why you need other people that's why AA is based on mutuality, community, feedback, and support. To bear the reality of who we have let ourselves become is sometimes hard to face. Once we have that moment of clarity, though, we find that alcoholism, in this case, is what we're talking about, is a symptom. You can call it a disease or whatever, but it's a symptom that requires you to look at all the other ways you might do more healthy things that enable you to cope with the challenges and painful aspects of your life. And they're often so mundane. When I listen to the things people advance, Steve Miles, a bioethicist here in Minneapolis, where I live, says gardening. He's become a master gardener. I mean, you take your obsessions into the cure as well as the illness, and jazz, listening to jazz. And he said he often had a threat of a meltdown I like when he came out of Thailand and had spent days watching trucks loaded with bodies stacked up, passing hour after hour, taking out thousands of dead bodies. He said when you have a threat of a meltdown like that in a public grocery store, as he did first time that hit him, he said you learn you have to go to, in his case, he went to a seaside village in Italy and just spent a few days experiencing the normality of life in the village, going to the market, experiencing the loveliness of people, the beauty of the day, because all these things still exist. But you need to consciously plug into them. And so I'll have a long list of other things that people have said that help ameliorate the difficulties. And they're things we all know, but the trick is not to know them in our heads. The trick is to implement them in our lives. And to get the support we need to do that, if we find it's very difficult to do it. We joked when we first start, well, my workout isn't what it was once. Well, if you want it to be more, intentionality is the key term. You and I both use it. You want to be intentional about that. You may need to build it in a different way in your life, and then you may need to get support in building it in. A lot of people, when they run, have a running buddy. And when they know that at 7 o'clock in the morning, the doorbell's going to ring, and they better be ready to go out and do 5 miles, they have a different attitude toward being ready to do that than if they're relying on themselves only. They're in bed where it's warm. It's still 7 in the morning, but it's chilly out. And you just say, oh, the hell with it. And then you roll over and forget it. So building in truly supportive people in your life and building out those who try to undermine you. I mean, when I mentioned the kind of healthy eating I try to do, people often make disparaging and mocking noises about it, as if being a megapounder, being 400 pounds and having your knees replaced way too soon is normal, and eating healthy food is not. And I try not to be defensive about it. Just eat the veggies, eat the fruits, eat the grains. Don't eat too much of the other stuff. Everybody knows these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's the doing of them that can become difficult. It's so easy. And America, America. We live in America, and it bombards us with 24/7. It's impossible to walk through Applebee's without vomiting. When you just people have ordered, mega platters with I don't know, 3,000-4,000 calories on them. And you look at the people who are eating that. You know that when you're sitting on a plane and you see one of those coming down the aisle, you get religion. It's like a foxhole. You say, please, Jesus, let him sit in 28. Let him not stop at 27 on the aisle and take over half my seat. It's not normal, but there are lots of ways you can make a decision and then act on it because you want to live. You want to live, and you want to have a healthy a body and a mind that supports your intention in life. And the simple truth of that is that most people do. It's just that when you look at their bodies, their intention may not be what they think it is. When
That's a good
intention
point.
changes, then your body comes along. Got a story about that, but I won't waste your time on a podcast. So the bottom line is, I'll be talking frankly and honestly and with sincerity and out of my own experience, what it's done to me, to people about the alerts we should pay attention to and the kinds of friends we need, because the work has to be done. Security is important. Intelligence work is important. We want our structure to continue more or less as it is if we value it. And so just doing everything we can to enhance the likelihood that's going to happen is incumbent upon all of us. Let's be the adults in the room.
Good stuff, Richard. All right. Well, I always love having conversations with you, and I'm looking forward to having you at the conference so we can chat further.
Can't wait. Source is such a great conference. Not only the fellow presenters who I love, but the people I meet there are terrific. So once you got a hold of that animal, you have been wrestling it into shape. It's kind of like a knight's quest, and you're beating the dragon. So it's a privilege I'm thrilled to be there again, and thanks so much.
No problem. Some days I wonder, am I Lancelot or am I Don Quixote? But it's
Yeah, well,
it's fun either way.
they both wound up dead, so
Yeah, exactly.
pick one.
All right, Richard. Well, we're looking forward to seeing you at
Okay.
Source Austin on December 5th and 6th. And
I'll
for
see you.
those of you who want to come by and hang out and enjoy the conversations with Richard, please stop by.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Richard. Talk to you soon.
Take care.